This is the last installment of our seminar series of Industrial Engineering Department at Yaşar University for the semester. And we are happy to have Caner Taçoğlu with us. I don't need to look at his bibliography. I can probably say from memory because Caner, I've known him for a long time. Caner is a graduate of Industrial and Systems Engineering Department from İzmir University of Economics. And I worked for a little while as in industry, right, Caner? And then yes, and then went on, went on to get his master's degree from UK King's College, engineering management, and a PhD in industrial engineering from Istanbul Technical University, while through which he was working as a research assistant at İzmir University of Economics. And he's an assistant professor in the same department since 2019. He also is a very handsome person and was at one time a tennis player, as I remember.
Yes, everything is so accurate.
Yes, so accurate. I know some of the information, but I'll hold on to them for a future meeting where I can embarrass him even further. But it's great to have you here, Caner. Caner has been working on a number of things, but among them, which is of interest to us among strategic management, operations management, lean thinking, is blockchain technology. And when I heard him that he's been working on this for a while, I asked him if he could talk us through some of his research and maybe even some of the basic terminology, and he kindly agreed to do that. So today he's going to talk about blockchain technology and volatility spillovers among cryptocurrencies. All right, well, Caner, the floor is yours. You should have access to share everything. And during the attempt, as always, we would ask the listeners to turn off their cameras and microphones through the presentation, but depending on how the speaker prefers, you can ask him questions. Everybody has access to do so.
Okay, thank you very much, Mahmut Hocam. It's a great pleasure to be here today. So yeah, we will talk about blockchain technology, some basics first, and then we will talk about volatility spillovers, a recent article we have made today. It includes so much financial details, so I tried to convert it to an easier version, as us industrial engineers would be easier to understand. Now, let me share my screen. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Let me try again. I thought I did that. Caner, just give me a second. Caner. Maybe something should come up on your screen and
yes,
try now.
Right now I can, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I hope you can see at the moment.
Yes.
Okay. So the content of today's seminar will be, we will speak about a little bit introduction to cryptocurrencies. Then we will speak about the blockchain technology, the basics, cryptocurrencies, and we will begin to speak about our most recent research about the volatility spillovers. Of course, I will try to explain as simply as possible all these because we are all new actually, and I'm not so expert on the topic as well, especially for the financial methodology. So I just had to simplify the article as much as I could. And now to introduce as a little introduction here, actually the second topic here of blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies are an introduction as well. But to give a view, over the recent years, the popularity and the use of cryptocurrencies in the global financial system has increased. At the moment, we can hear all those media. So everyone's speaking and talking about cryptocurrencies here. So the global financial system is now recognizing all these cryptocurrencies as well. So despite the high risk in the cryptocurrency market, the cryptocurrencies are becoming attractive as a new financial investment instrument due to their high return expectations, decentralized nature, exemption from strict government regulations, and tax exemption advantages. Now, at the moment, for example, many countries, it's still, we can get away without taxes, and we can just sit with the gains. But at the moment, in, for example, United States, they have really strict rules that you can't evade tax at the moment if you are gaining money from the cryptocurrencies. However, that only applies whenever we use banks, right? So if we just take money to our banks, then we have to, of course, become regulated. In this world, actually, we don't have to use banks, and we can just continue using the digital wallets that we have. And with cryptocurrencies, we can continue the spending things without even the need of the banks. We will speak of that. So the new opportunities for the investors to diversify the portfolios is emerging with all this blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. Now, in many of the articles, the blockchain definition is this. So blockchain is a shared or open, immutable and distributed ledger that facilitates the process of recording transactions and tracking assets in a business network. So I took this definition from IBM's website instead of one of the articles because they are the same. So we always see this open and immutable distributed ledger. So I want to speak about what do we mean by an open distributed ledger. So by ledger, it doesn't ring any bells first, but so let me illustrate this with using the paints here. Okay, my drawing will be terrible, but please bear with me. So let's say that we have a network of 4 people here. So person A, person B, person C, and person D. So let's say that person A wants to send 5 Turkish liras to person B. Now this transaction is immediately written or recorded on a ledger that tells A sent to B 5 Turkish liras. So whenever, for example, B sends C 10 Turkish liras, then another ledger is opened and B sent to C 10 Turkish liras is written here. Now, they're actually chained together. Then, whenever C sends D 15 Turkish liras, again, another ledger is opened here and recorded that C sent to D 15 Turkish liras, which is, again, chained together. So as you can see, if we increase the number of networks, we increase the chain of transactions as well. So this is called a chain of transactions, okay? So therefore, actually, these becoming some chains, therefore the name blockchain emerged. So these are all ledgers or blocks. And information, any kind of information or transaction is recorded on these blocks, which are chained together. So therefore, the name comes blockchain. So this ledger is publicly available to person E, person Z, whatever. Okay, so everyone can see the chain of transactions here. So that's why this is called open. So the first idea of it's being shared and open comes from this. Everyone is, so this information is publicly available. So let's look at the immutable and distributed properties of this ledger. So let me open this paint again. Now, normally, the current systems today, banks or any other centralized organization, has the authority to keep these records on their own databases. So they have a database and they keep the chain of transactions or records in their own database. So actually, theoretically, they can change the information flow here because they own the old database here. They can make any changes they wish to this chain of events. So how do we make it immutable then? Or why is it called distributed? The major advantage of blockchain technology here is that we no more have this central authority here. No more database of the banks and so on. So where does this information go then? Actually, this information is in, for example, A's computers. This ledger is on A, this ledger is on B, or this ledger is on C. So each of these members of the network have the chain of transactions. So they store knowledge here. So that's why this is called distributed. Distributed property comes from this. So every participant on the network has a copy of the information flow or the transaction details or data. So because we have all the information on every member of the network, one central authority can't come and change the details here. They have no power on the network, or they have no power to change events. So why is it immutable then? Immutable here meaning we can't change when the data is stored. So whenever we write, for example, A sent B 5 Turkish liras, this information cannot be changed by any authority. So we already told that every member here, for example, A, B, and C has this information here. Why, for example, D with the same information is not able to change this data? Because in order to change this data, they have to broadcast to the network that, for example, they want to change something. No, A didn't send B 5 Turkish liras, they sent 10 Turkish liras. So they need to broadcast this information to the network. And normally, A will say no. A sent B 5 Turkish liras. B will say no. So if this announcement doesn't arrive into a consensus, then a change is not possible on the network. So the only possible way that D succeeds broadcasting this information and change the real information is called a 51% attack. So this is when an entity owns 51% or more of the whole network, then they actually can change things or make it like they can create new, for example, they can say, I have 1 million Turkish liras here as well. So the reason why Bitcoin is so secure is no one in the world has even, let's say, more than 1% of the network. It's impossible, really. And that's why the Bitcoin network is the most secure network of all. And everyone is just saying that or speaking about Bitcoin and how safe it is and so on. But this is the general idea in the most simplest terms. So, of course, there is a lot of things to consider here and calculate here. It's not that easy, but I found this way to explain people that so everyone can understand. This is how I actually started digging into the blockchain technology as well. So if you want to move into a next step, a bit more advanced step, I'm sure some of you have found or heard about the miners, Bitcoin miners, using those graphical cards. What does it mean to be a miner then? Let's talk about, give a little bit information about this as well, and then let's continue about our slides. So miners here are the ones who are actually approving the transactions. And the miners are person, can be person A, can be person B or so, but they have this copy of the whole blockchain, and they are the ones to approve if A really sent B, for example, 5 Turkish liras. And how does it being approved? How do the miners approve that? Let's say we have miner 1, miner 2, miner 3, and miner 4. And information has been broadcasted. So all these miners will try to approve this. So in order to do that, they make some calculations and find a new block here. So think about, we are creating a new block here to write the transaction into the blockchain. But in order to create this block, one of the miners have to do it. Not every miner can do it. So with some calculations, which graphical cards, they are actually using those graphics cards to calculate this. So for example, if miner 1 calculates first, they create this new block to write this information into. So they are being incentivized by the whole network. So they are paying 0.003 BTC, for example, for finding this new block. Right? So actually the miners are the ones who secure the whole network and approve all these transactions on the behind the scenes, let's say. Of course, normal users are sending cryptocurrencies to one another, but behind the scenes, actually, there are these miners or real people or their computers working to create new blockchains or blocks that will add into the chain of transactions. So this is just the why we always see this open, immutable ledger idea. So the whole idea is like that. So the general problem we have today, for example, is slow, failed, or intransparent transactions. For example, why do we have slow transactions? If I want to send money to United States today, or in the weekend, I will not be able to send it. Or sometimes failed transactions. Again, on Saturday, I can't send any transactions. Or sometimes it costs too much to send these transactions. So the blockchain actually solves a problem to these areas. However, that's only the tip of the iceberg, as you can see here. Blockchain is not Bitcoin. So it's still a mixed concept for whenever, for example, people hear about Bitcoin, they think the Bitcoin and the blockchain is the same. However, it's not the same. Bitcoin is actually using the blockchain technology to make those transactions. This whole idea is a blockchain, for example, technology. And Bitcoin, you can send Bitcoin here and write from the Bitcoin network or Bitcoin blockchain network, or you can just create another blockchain network and use that as well. So the reason why Bitcoin is so special is, first of all, it's the first cryptocurrency ever created. So this whole cryptocurrency idea started with Bitcoin, and it's also the safest. And it's also the, according to the market capitalization, how big the cryptocurrencies is. Of course, Bitcoin is the father of all Bitcoins. And at the moment, it has close to $1 trillion of market cap, which is huge, really huge. So the blockchain network is said that, or the blockchain technology is huge. So what are the other use cases other than sending money, sending transactions, or Bitcoin? So let's have a look at them. So we already talked about some money transfers, which is, for example, speed, cost, availability of transfers. If you are using a blockchain network and send money, you can just send it anytime, anywhere, with a little fee, and its speed will be really high. Although I'm not talking about Bitcoin here, because Bitcoin is a bit slower compared to other blockchain networks. For example, Ripple, let's say Ripple, it takes only seconds to send one transaction to another transaction. So the cost is negligible as well, and you can just make this transaction any time you wish here. So we can have we can solve these problems, money transfer problems, with blockchain technology. However, let's look at some other things as well, like government. At the moment, including Turkey, this voting corruption is one thing everyone is talking about. And actually, if you are using a blockchain technology, because of its immutable property. You can't change or you can't play around with the votes that the real people have cast. So that's one of the reasons why we can, for example, use the blockchain infrastructure for governments or record management to avoid the corruption we have or we always had, including this country or other countries. If every record is kept on the blockchain, then they can't actually change or play around with this. They can't, let's say this is not a 100% solution, but at least it will be much harder for them to change the data here using the blockchain technology. So let's speak about healthcare. Again, in the healthcare sector, the medical records of people are kept by different hospitals, by different entities, and so on. So whenever a person wants to visit, complete another doctor, reaching all those records would be really, or sometimes be impossible even. So because these hospitals may choose to stick to their own data and don't share it. So using the blockchain in healthcare sector, where every medical record is accessible, then of course we can even change or save more lives with this data available everywhere. General and social media, for example, at the moment, your tweets might get deleted, or in social media, other channels, the government may restrict you from entering some websites and so on. They censor your freedom. So in the blockchain case, there is no censorship. So you can access anywhere, any way you want. But of course, with this non-censorship and non-regulation on social media or other general media stuff, then of course, some unwanted or hate speech or other malicious activities can be there as well. So, and this is again governed by some people or entities which are, or which can be called the decentralized autonomous organizations, which are, so DAOs. So these decentralized autonomous organizations might be in charge of, sometimes if the whole public, like let's say 80% of the people want something to be deleted from that social media, then it can be sometimes deleted, let's say. So it's not a wild west where everyone can do everything they wish. Supply chain management. So this is an interesting use case for the blockchain as well. So for the supply chain management, let's say we can track all the products in live. So whenever the raw materials move from where at what hour, and knowing that these data can't be changed, for example, both the customers, retailers, suppliers, everyone would be more trusting to all these processes. Finally, Web 3.0, which is again a very popular and hot topic today. It's about the data ownership, digital wallets, and so on. So let's speak about Web 1.0, where it all started. So Web 1.0 back to 1995 years. So remember those times we had static, read-only web pages. We will just visit those web pages, read something like Wikipedia, and just leave those sites. Then the Web 2.0 emerged. In Web 2.0, some more dynamic relations with the websites have begun. And actually in Web 2.0, the data started to be shared, or let's say some companies took the data of the users and used those as micro-marketing for each people. So, but those data, some other companies kept our data. Those data were never shared with us. So Web 2.0 at the moment, with all those ethical issues, or the kişisel kanunların, kişisel verilerin korunması kanunu in Turkish, for example. All these emerged because now we are concerned with all those ethical issues or problematic issues that all these data collection brought to us at the moment. So Web 3.0, with the usage of blockchain technology, actually we as users, as internet users, now become the masters of our own data. We own our own data. No one is collecting our data, let's say. So we can do whatever we wish with our own data. We can, for example, whenever we post a video with education video, someone can just come and donate to us, or we can sell it freely. Everyone is free for information sharing, for what they want to do in this area. And everyone, for example, digital wallets, MetaMask is one of those examples. With our digital wallets, with no entity actually watching us or regulating us. These digital wallets can't be accessed by anyone else. This is our own wallet, and only us can access to it with some private keys. So of course, if we share our private keys with someone else, then our funds will be gone. Or if we forget the passwords of our digital wallets, then all is gone as well, because there is no central authority who would help us to find our password. So there are downsides, but of course there are upsides as well. Like we can do whatever we wish with our own wallet. And actually with these digital wallets at the moment, you can invest in any of the cryptocurrencies you want without the need to answer to banks, without having need to answer the governments. No one is able to see what you are doing actually. So I'm really curious how they will bring these regulations to a space like this. It will be too hard, and they will really need many experts on this. But the idea, the concept behind is because it's data ownership, I'm not sure how they will be able to regulate all this. The technology itself is made for unregulation. All right, so this is the entry level of blockchain technology. Of course, all these topics at the moment have articles. So the whole science community, who is interested in all these blockchain technology, is at the moment, there are so many articles emerging from all these new use cases. And of course, new use cases arrive each day with new blockchain networks or companies who are solving problems or everyday problems. But of course, many of them are in the concept or idea phase. Okay, so let's speak about our empirical study, which is a very current study. It was published back in January 2022. So we just looked at the volatility spillovers among the G7 and E7 stock markets and cryptocurrencies. So the aim of our study was to explore the relationship between the cryptocurrencies, and we took Bitcoin and Ethereum into consideration, and stock market indices of G7 and E7 countries to analyze the return and volatility spillover patterns among these markets with the usage of M-Gauge approach. So using the multivariate gauge and back specification developed by Eagle and Kroner, we will study the dynamics of the conditional volatility and volatility independence among the stock market and cryptocurrencies, and the volatility persistence of each of these variables, as well as on and cross volatility spillover effects between the stock markets and cryptocurrencies. So the previous research, actually the blockchain and especially Bitcoin and Ethereum literature is really interesting, because you will see many articles opposing each other. So one article will say, for example, Bitcoin is safe haven. Whatever there is a COVID crash, whenever there is inflation, it doesn't matter. You can always invest in Bitcoin. Some of the articles will say that. And some of the other articles will say, if gold crashes, Bitcoin crashes as well. If US dollar index decreases, Bitcoin decreases as well. So there are many contradicting articles at the moment, and they are really from articles from 2020. They are really recent articles, and these articles are contradicting each other. So it shows that this Bitcoin and blockchain literature is so new, and it's not really, there is no real consensus on these concepts, whether Bitcoin is, what financial asset should Bitcoin be? For example, governments are still unsure about how to treat Bitcoin. Is it a commodity? Is it like a currency? What is it? So people are still talking about this. And in science, there is no consensus as well. So, for example, some will say Bitcoin is a weak hedge against equities, and some will say Bitcoin is a strong hedge against equities. One say buy Bitcoin, the other says don't ever buy Bitcoin. And these are all scientific articles with published in renowned or good journals, let's say. So with index, Web of Science index journals. So our contribution will be threefold here with this article. So first, to the best of our knowledge, our study investigates the return and volatility transmissions between cryptocurrencies and large sample of countries, both E7 and G7 countries. So we didn't see any article this with that much data in it. So with the integration analysis of the largest investable sample of stock markets within the cryptocurrency market may further help to identify whether there exist any differences in terms of shock and volatility transmissions. I will give brief definitions about all these, what is shock transmission, what is volatility transmission, and so on. So thirdly, considering the increasing popularity of cryptocurrencies worldwide and the rising performance of stock markets, which is, I'm not sure it's this case today and from now on, because some of the stock markets are on decline. So the investigation of statistical properties of cryptocurrencies and the stock market prices from an integrated point of view will help us to test the degree of persistence of each of these specific series using the methods. We have barge and back gauge methods. The results of this study are important for investment decisions as it establishes the patterns of information transmission across stock markets and the cryptocurrencies. So the identification of return and volatility spillovers will provide useful insights to investors on how to maximize their returns with the portfolio investments. But of course, our results here are in contradiction with some of the other articles as well. So we can never say that this is an investment decision, let's say, or investment advice. Okay, so Bitcoin and Ethereum among the most popular cryptocurrencies in terms of trade activity and market value, which I think Bitcoin and Ethereum at the moment just holds around 60% of the whole cryptocurrency market, with thousands of different cryptocurrencies. So that's why we only took Bitcoin and Ethereum into consideration in this article. And the stock markets are chosen with respect to the market openness in G7 and E7 countries. So the data for cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and Ethereum, were taken from the CoinDesk, and daily closing price of stock index series is obtained from ICOM platform, and all the data we expressed in US dollars. So the sample data for Bitcoin and G7 and E7 stock markets extend from 2013 to 2021 with a total of 1,868 observations, and with a little bit less data for Ethereum because we had no data available before 2015 for Ethereum. So the multivariate gauge models have been extensively used in the economic literature to investigate the volatility transmissions. That's why we have chosen it as well. So let's look a bit about these empirical results. For E7, emerging 7 countries, the results reveal that there is only a bidirectional mean spillover between the cryptocurrencies and Indian stock markets, while we couldn't find any information flow in Mexico. And the unidirectional return spillovers from stock markets to the Ethereum market exist only in Indonesia and Brazil, while the same direction exists only in Indonesia and Russia for the Bitcoin market. Let me just pass here and I will just show this table here so that it will be better to visualize what our results, let's say. So this is the results for E7 countries and Bitcoin. And we have another table for the G7 countries. For E7 countries, this is the volatility spillover panel here is what we are really interested in, because the mean spillover effect is to see the short run effects of, for example, from BIST 100 to Bitcoin or from Bitcoin to BIST 100. So this concept here, the volatility spillover concept here says that. So the volatility, we are talking about the price volatility here. So sometimes it increases too much, sometimes it decreases too much. If that's the case, that means we have too much volatility, for example. So the changes in volatility, for example, in BIST 100, in Turkey, for example, does it affect Bitcoin price or not? Or how does the change of volatility in the BIST 100 affect the Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies in Turkey, for example? Or the same way, does the Bitcoin volatility, the change in the Bitcoin volatility affect BIST 100 or other stock markets? So, for example, one way here tells us that Jakarta change, the change in Jakarta market, actually affects the Bitcoin in the short term. And for example, sometimes the change of volatility change or volatility spillovers of Bitcoin might affect some stock markets as well in some cases. So the bidirectional means that there is an effect, so both of them affect each other. So how is this information useful for us? For example, if there is no information flow between Bitcoin and Jakarta, we can say that because this volatility, there is no volatility spillover between them, you can invest in Jakarta and Bitcoin to be more safe because there is no relationship between them. But for example, in BIST 100, if we see a bidirectional relationship, that means that if we invest in both Bitcoin and BIST 100, then it means we are not diversifying our portfolio. These are affecting each other. So it's like we are putting our money in the same basket. Or theoretically, it's like that. So if we are looking only for one directional or no information available for this or no directions here to make sure that if we are investing in Bitcoin, we are just diversifying our portfolio. Hence, we reduce the risks actually. So the interesting result here is for the emerging 7 countries, we see that there are just unidirectional effects between the Bitcoin and the stock markets. Whereas for the G7 developed countries, economically advanced countries, we see that the Bitcoin and the stock market indices for those countries are almost all bidirectional. They affect each other. So it doesn't make sense to invest in Bitcoin in these developed countries, but it does make sense to invest in Bitcoin in emerging markets. So the mean spillover here is the short term of the volatility spillover. So volatility spillover effect is like a more longer term, and the mean spillovers is for shorter term investments. And lastly, this shock transmission here we see is the effect of the news. Like Fed will make a new announcement. So that immediately is a shock to the market. So these are our interesting results that we can see, and we can see a real difference between E7 and G7 countries. Right, as a conclusion, these results indicate that cryptocurrencies may be used as an alternative option by investors for both returns and portfolio management, especially for the emerging markets. Finding the existing of return spillover effects show that investors will seek alternative assets in the market or abandon these markets when they expect some future shocks. So the empirical findings of this study is providing key implications for policymakers, market participants, and international investors seeking alternative financial assets to diversify their portfolios as their management strategies. Firstly, it provides useful information for the policymakers to understand the dynamic volatility transmissions in the cryptocurrency market, to conduct the appropriate policy measures to eliminate the negative impact of cryptocurrencies volatility on the stability of financial markets. And secondly, the findings of this study supports investment planning, regardless of whether the cryptocurrency and stock markets are integrated. Therefore, our results unveil some limited risk hedging opportunities for these portfolio managers, resulting from an increase in volatility spillovers. And the results of this research enable the detection of early warning signals for investors, portfolio managers, and risk managers in the support of their investment decisions. So that will be it from my side. And actually, I want to just finish with our current research here. Actually, we thought that by applying some heuristic methods for the price prediction of Bitcoin or some altcoins will be our next study here, so that we can integrate at least some of these industrial engineering tools for this region. So there are many opportunities in this area, as you can, if you remember, the literature is really interesting and contradicting each other. Okay, thank you very much for listening to me. If you have any questions, we can discuss it.
Janak, thank you very much. Very interesting. I actually maybe have a ground question before I take any other questions. When you are looking at the volatility spillover, so you're looking at the relationship. So if volatility in one side affects the other or the other way around. So the simplest thing I can think of is looking at that volatility of financial markets. Do we measure that by what? Changes in like standard deviation over a certain amount of time, the value of it, or how do we measure volatility in a financial market?
It's variance, yes, exactly like you said. It's about the standard deviations of the whole price changes. And then
this, so if you're looking spillover relationship, is that some sort of correlation analysis between these two? Okay, so because I'm not familiar with M-Garch or what multi-Garch or multivariate Garch, what that's.
I'm not that familiar either, but as we have discussed it with the other
something like that. Yeah. Something like okay. Adalet Hocam, you have a question. Please.
Yeah, I have a question. Maybe I didn't get it, but I'm curious that who controls the amount of Bitcoin in circulation? For example, in the official system, if the yes, please.
Yes. So actually there is no control on that, because whenever the Bitcoin network or the Bitcoin was first invented, the creator, which is or who is called Satoshi Nakamoto. So actually that group or that person coded it so that it can have at most 216 million Bitcoins at most. So no one can ever change that whole supply. So we can't, for example, make or add to the network 1 million more Bitcoins. So in order to do that, one has to own the 51% or more of the whole network. So it's coded like that. So we can't put any more circulation of Bitcoin. But what's happening at the moment is, for example, the maximum supply that we can reach is 216 million. But at the moment, we have, let's say, around 150 million Bitcoins in total. But we are reaching to the maximum supply every passing year. That's because every miner, after every successful transaction, is getting paid by the Bitcoin, by the network itself. So we will reach to a point where we are at the maximum supply of Bitcoin, and no other new Bitcoins can be minted or put into the circulation ever again. So
what will happen then?
Yes, there is actually an ongoing arguments about what will happen then whenever we reach the maximum supply of Bitcoin, and will the miners get incentivized or not? Because if they are not getting incentivized, why would they pay for the electricity? Or why would they continue to run their computers if no blocks will be added? But that's a really long way. We have like 20 or 30 years until because the graph is not like going straight up. It's like a inverse graph. So there will be a point that the addition of the new Bitcoins will be so small that even 0.0001 will mean a lot. So we can expect because of that, we can expect like abnormal prices for each Bitcoin, because it will get scarce and scarce every passing year actually. But I think they have ways of incentivizing the transactions or miners if we even reach the maximum supply. So I'm not really aware of the real plans of the whole network, but they will just integrate a new system or a technology that would incentivize miners somehow. So it will be done somehow.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Önder Hocam, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Hocam. Caner Hocam, thank you for the nice presentation. You showed us the results. Actually, you summarized the results using tables, right? Do you have the tables for each year separately, or in a cumulative way? I mean, 2 years data, 3 years, 4 years. It will be interesting to see what happens for each year, because these most probably these results depend on the state of the current politics, worldwide economy, crisis, wars, pandemics. So do you have the yearly results?
We don't have the yearly results because the data would be so small then to work on all these.
For each year, how many data points do you have?
So in total, we had 1,800 data. For yearly, it would be, so this is for 8 years of data. So it would be so less than, I think. So I'm not sure if the yearly data will show results that are reliable in that way. So,
But okay, due to the sample size, you are right. But from the other extreme, everything is changing so fast, right?
Yes.
So using 8 years data might not have that kind of, let me say, reflections, and it's a cumulative sum or a statistic showing that there is a relation, but most of that relation might be due to 2013, between 2013 and 2015. So there might be such a problem in these kind of studies. Actually, I think that's the main reason why you see some conflicts in the literature. It depends exactly for which time you are doing this, because these are dependent on some other major global, let me say, metrics and statistics. When they change, these will change automatically. So that's one point from my side. The second point is about your method. How do you measure here in your study, of course, volatility and volatility spillover? There are different ways of tracing volatility, right? Do you directly use the standard deviation of the sample or some other metrics?
Well, I'm not really so proficient in this, because we had two more authors which actually applied the methodologies here, MGARCH and other methods. So they are the experts on this, let's say. So
okay,
I'm not so into this financial methodologies they use.
Okay, then thank you.
But thank you very much. So actually, we started this thinking about if we can use only the COVID crash years, like 2 years of COVID. So what happened during these years? And let's compare this with before pandemic and during the pandemic. So it was one of our ideas, actually. So to compare these two data would be interesting, as you suggested as well. So who knows, perhaps one of the next studies could be like comparing these data of what happened before, what happened after, and so on.
Right. If there are no other questions, I will ask actually. First, a comment that I've seen my fair share of studies trying to reliably forecast financial markets, and I think that's that conflict that you're talking about between different studies is partly due to maybe what Önder also says, but there's no such really reliable financial market or financial market estimation. I think it's an impossible goal that we are talking about, because it's so difficult to model. You'll always, if you find a model who claims to be a little bit good, then you'll always find a contradicting case that it won't actually perform good. Like, before COVID, but we didn't know about the pandemic. Yeah, but it's part of life. Pandemics happen, right? So then I think it's in that much detail, it cannot. Now, for me, what was interesting is that I, of course, being more of a deterministic researcher in the supply chain and production distribution kind of person, when you talked about this, just one line where blockchain technology and its usage in supply chain, which I started to read a little bit at one point in time. And one of the things that I've seen was, it seemed to me personally impractical to use that for distribution of goods and logistics in general, because we're moving so much goods so quickly around the world. But there is one part of supply chain study which is called traceability, and traceability is for important security items, like you would trace which serial number product you're putting in an automobile, for example, but that we would do that for ABS system, for airbags, and those critical to quality, critical to life expectancy kind of things, or even in medication and pharmaceutical drug production. I think that might be one important thing where, especially if you're looking for counterfeits, right? And there would be counterfeit drugs, or maybe, I don't know, even alcohol, those kind of things. Traceability issues, I think, an interesting application for these kind of things.
Yes.
If you have any thoughts, or if you have come across, you can talk about that. And before you answer that, I have one final question, which is important. Do you yourself have both Bitcoins, Jenna?
Of course.
Of course. Okay, then that gives me a good sign that I can actually invest in that. Okay, but if you have any comments on, if you have read anything or heard about this traceability issue in supply chain and blockchain, I'd like to hear what you think or what you have read.
Yes, I have actually come across many of those articles, and these articles are just exactly talking about what you have said. The traceability, transparency. So they just focus on those, and of course, this is not applicable for all any kind of areas, but especially for food products. So they have these articles on food supply chain, so that everyone will be aware where their food comes from, if any data has been changed, and who are the owners of the data, is it publicly available, and so on. So this is especially very popular for the food blockchain at the moment. And also the IBM now they offer some blockchain supply chain management integrations to companies. So I'm not sure if they are at the moment applying this to any kind of firm, or just food products, or just some special cases where tracking the products or the raw materials would be really, let's say, logical, let's say. So at the moment, the supply chain management actually goes with the tracking or transparency issues. So that's the whole, at the moment, they are focusing on that. And for Bitcoin, I have been holding Bitcoin like, let's say, 7 years. So my journey begins from the old times, let's say.
Okay. So don't tell that in a lot of places, apparently people kidnap people who own Bitcoin. So
no, not that much, of course. But back those times, if I knew, I would just sell all my house, everything.
Okay. Definitely very interesting. That food product thing is also, we'll see. But I think as the number of applications increases, that your or people's estimation of how long it's going to take to reach to the limit of Bitcoin, which Adalet Hoca asked, might actually change drastically, because as you find areas of new application, if you get this thing into circulation of the whole commercial area, like food and then supply chain or raw materials, suddenly the demand for these miners is suddenly increase tens of folds, and might drastically or significantly, let's say, change the estimations when we are going to get to the end of Bitcoin supply.
But the thing there is actually people are not using Bitcoin for any kind of transaction. People are using Bitcoin for a store of value, more important. So it's like the gold they put under their bed pillows. So they just buy and wait like that. So because it's really inefficient to use the Bitcoin network at the moment for transactions. Instead, we have many copies of those blockchains who are using sometimes. By the way, there are some changes in the blockchain networks as well. For example, the Bitcoin network, the network that Bitcoin uses, is called proof of work network. So in proof of work consensus or technology, there is the miners technology there. And at the moment, because there are issues about the proof of work consensus, the major issue here is the usage of energy consumption, carbon footprints, and so on. So actually, there are some other technologies at the moment who doesn't need any usage of work or any usage of, let's say, those graphic cards. So the new technologies are still emerging. So if they're able to make a perfect version of this proof of, whether this is proof of work, proof of stake, or proof of, I don't know, some new consensus arrive every day. So there will come a time, I think, where this most efficient consensus mechanism for the network or the blockchain technology will arrive. So everyone would just then use it. But yeah, Bitcoin will always be a store of value, in my opinion. And it's not really efficient at the moment to use that network for transactions or everyday transactions.
There, you have a follow-up or a new question?
A new one, if time permits.
I think we can end that. Yeah. Sure.
My new question is about the first part of the presentation, the introduction of the blockchain and the other stuff before the technical issues. By the way, I would like to thank you again for the first part, because whatever I know about blockchain technology and the Bitcoin and the other stuff is due to this presentation. I didn't know anything beforehand. My
Me
next
too.
my next question, that was very fruitful for me. My next question is a theoretical question. Maybe I didn't get the details. Maybe this question is not a meaningful one, but I would like to ask it. You said that if the majority says okay, a change can be made in the system, right?
Yes, not always changing the blocks that were written before, but for addition of new blocks. So
Okay.
you can add new blocks that would say, I have like $1 million, or I will just mint 1,000 Bitcoins now. I will have 1,000 Bitcoins now, and so on. Those blocks may be added to the system.
It is possible to edit the ledger, let's say.
Yes.
In general, in theory. But the safe part is due to the law of large numbers, right? Since there are many people spreading around the whole world, so it seems like it is safe. Can it be possible, in theory at least, to establish a new chain, such as this blockchain, which invites the players or the nodes or the miners, I don't know what to say, of the existing blockchain to the new chain, and offers them some kind of incentive to change the data? Is it possible?
Now,
You are too
theoretically,
foxy.
what happens is the miners in Bitcoin, I think it happened back in 2017. Exactly a thing like that happened actually. So a new fork or a copy of the whole Bitcoin network was copied, and a lot of miners from the Bitcoin network were incentivized to move into this new network, which is told to be a lot better than Bitcoin, which was called Bitcoin Cash in those days. So this Bitcoin Cash, actually, with all these new miners coming from the Bitcoin network, actually was really bad in those times. And actually, a new bear market for the Bitcoin started after that incident, because people just started to sell and panic that they were thinking that their Bitcoins would be lost with this introduction of new chain. However, everyone can at the moment copy the Bitcoin network and create a network on their own using that technology. Anyone can at the moment, and it doesn't anyway affect the Bitcoin whole network, unless theoretically, as you said, we take all the miners from the Bitcoin network to any other place. In that case, yes, some serious problems may arise, but they have tried it. They have tried it many times to take the Bitcoin miners off from the network so that they can increase their influence in the Bitcoin network. Somehow, if they can reach 51%, but that never happened. They didn't even get close to it because people would just stay in the Bitcoin network. It's really very hard to change people's minds in that case. Or sometimes miners will say, okay, I will just be in the Bitcoin network and be in your network at the same time. It doesn't matter. I can be anywhere I wish. So if their infrastructure is like, let's say, efficient enough for multiple mining of the multiple chains, then they will, of course, do it in those cases.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Let's see, are there any questions? We already actually also went over our time limit, but Caner, thank you very much. Definitely been interesting, and you see, sparked some not only information and knowledge, but sparked some discussion as well. Best of luck in your future research on this thing, and don't forget us when you get really, really rich. Thank you very much, and thanks everyone, and we'll see you in some other seminar.
Thank you very much. It was great to
Teşekkürler
meet you.
hocam.
Thank you very much.
Teşekkürler.
Başarılar.
Thank you.
Very interesting and informative presentation, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.